talk about initial, annual, and reevaluation IEPs. And then the bulk of our conversation is really going to center around transition planning, because this is kind of the key important part of why IEPs in high school are important. So we'll talk about transition planning and what that means. And then that'll lead us into the importance of family collaboration. And then lastly, we'll talk about post-high school opportunities for students with IEPs. And then it's not listed here, but we'll have a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can share it in the chat. We'll get to it at the end and we'll have a discussion.
Wonderful. So I will go over what is an IEP, just a general overview. Some of you may already know, are familiar with the term, but those of you listening who do not know, I will go over just a really brief background. But before I get into the IEP, I will do like a little IDEA and FAPE refresher, right? So for those of you who don't know, IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is a law that makes available a free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, right, to eligible children with disabilities. It was reauthorized in 2004 and recently amended in 2015. Some of the purposes under IDEA are the protection of rights of children with disabilities and their parents. Another purpose is to assist states, local, federal, and other educational agencies to provide education, to assist states in the implementation of services, and to ensure parents and students have the necessary tools to improve educational results. So under IDEA is the IEP, right? And so IEP is an individualized education program. It is a written plan created collaboratively by a school team and a student's parents that outlines a student's current level of performance, their annual education goals, special education services, accommodations, and/or modifications, and other related services. So this is a legal document that also outlines how and when the student's progress should be monitored and reported. Some of the components of an IEP, like I mentioned before, some of you may have already been very familiar with this, include current performance. So they are the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, usually used with the acronym PLAAFP. Another component is annual goals. Here comes another acronym, SMART goals, right, which are specific, measurable, actively phrased, realistic, time limited. Another component is placement, where the student is placed, right? So IDEA guides or suggests that the student should be placed in the least restrictive environment. And another component is special education and related services, which can mean academic, functional, behavior. Some of these services include OT, which is like occupational therapy, SLP, which is speech and language pathology. Other services could also include transportation, or APE, which is adaptive physical education. Another component is also dates and progress monitoring. So when do these services start and end? The duration, location, and frequency of such services that I just mentioned, and also when and how goals will be monitored and reported for the student. And certainly, last but certainly not least, right, is accommodations that a student may have in the classrooms, during assessments or tests, and or to assessment standards.
Perfect. So with that being said, I think it's really important, like Liz mentioned, those components of an IEP. Now, there are three different variations of an IEP, right? So you have your initial IEP, your annual IEP, and then your re-evals. So an initial IEP is a discussion where parents and educators create individualized educational program. And so this is for a student who went through the SST progress plan for, it was like a student success team, and they went through this whole process and their grades aren't getting better, or they may not be understanding the material that's being taught in class. They have their initial IEP, right? And within this initial IEP, there are goals that are created. There are services that are discussed as a team to make sure that the student is, having the best maturation process within the classroom. Once the initial IEP happens, there is an annual IEP that's conducted. So every year, the students and the family will have a review and an update of the student's IEP plan that takes place at least once a year. This plan outlines the student's goals and services for the school year. So if a student has an IEP and they have minutes in reading, writing, and ELD, or which would be English language development, those goals will be discussed and we will see if the student made progress based off of those goals, right? And so that is what the annual IEP talks about. And then the last but not least, which is the reevaluation IEP. So this IEP happens every 3 years and it determines if a student with a disability should continue to receive special education or related services. Just a brief side note, I had to do a reevaluation today. It took like an hour and a half. The school psychologist and everything was there, but reevaluations, they happen every 3 years. Now another like critical piece that also happens with IEPs, especially for students that are in high school, is something that's called transition planning. Transition planning is like super, super critical because our whole goal as educators is not to just teach students, different contents like Pythagorean theorem or any other like thing that they need to know in class, but we also are trying to make for sure we have a holistic learning experience for all students, right? So we want to make for sure that they're functional once they leave our school gates. So, this is an ITP. It's called the Individual Transition Plan. And so the basic definition is it's a written plan that helps students with disabilities prepare for life after high school. And then it's based on a student's individual needs and interests. I think it's really important that like critical word in ITP is the individualized piece. So every student on my particular case, so I have like 23 students, all students won't necessarily need the same plan, right? So how do we make sure we craft a plan that's tailored just to that specific student's needs? The people who are involved in the ITP process is the student, parents or guardians and family members, teachers, including special education teachers or general education teachers, school counselors, school psychologists, administrators, vocational rehabilitation counselors, and or community service providers, right? And so then the question is like, why is it needed? It provides a structured roadmap for students with disabilities to prepare for life after high school. I think that we need to give students all of the tools that they need to be successful, right? And so that's what we aim to try to do. And then when does it happen? So the school district must start the transition planning no later than when the student is 16 years old. In some districts, it can be as early as 14 years old. But as a family member, as a parent, as a brother, as a sister, you can always ask for a transition plan. You can always request it before the age of 16 or 14. So I just want to make for sure that you guys are aware of your rights going forward. I feel like this was the moment where we could have asked the pop quiz, but we're all on Zoom, so it may not work. Um, and then so the assessment conducted during the transition planning. So it's a set of evaluation tools used to gather information about a interests, skills, and needs to develop a personalized individual transition plan as part of the IP work. So here are like I personally use this transition to work inventory. That's one of the metrics that I would use, and it's like a massive like pamphlet almost what I kin it to, and they students have to answer questions based off of the skills that they like, and then once they answer, it's like, do you like building things? Are you great with robotics, or do you like prefer working with your hands? Those type of things of that nature. Once they answer all of those questions, then they look and then they see and they it's a like a table and it's a scorer and it's a reader to say what their highest interest is in. I think that this is a great way and a great tool for students to be able to learn about different activities and job opportunities that they may not never known that existed. I think another like important piece that we'll talk about later is also parent surveys and making sure that parents are a part of that ITP, right? It's really, really important that we take into account that sometimes students may, they may say after high school, I want to make for sure I work with my family, or I'm looking to work on this business with my mom or with my dad, right? So again, we want to just take like a holistic approach to the students' maturation process. And so these are like some of the examples of the ITP, like I was saying before. This is one that I used today, actually. It's like the one net interest profiler. And so here it says like on the second one, it says like realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, right? these are the different areas that students are able to see, like, oh, okay, I'm much better at socializing and being like a social butterfly and talking and engaging with individuals. And then after they look at the social component, then they would stop and they would say, oh, okay, you know what? I have some or high job preparation. Based off of my high job preparation, these are potential avenues and these are the potential careers that I can take to ensure that I put myself in the best possible position going forward. So it gives them a wide variety, and they don't have to cast their net so small and so limited. And I actually personally had students who wanted to become a mechanical engineer, and they didn't even know they wanted to become a mechanical engineer and until they took this interest profiler, and he actually came back to me like 2 weeks ago, like, Mister, you know what? I'm working on getting my degree and I should be graduating this year. And so it makes me happy to know that the work that we're actually doing and the work that we're putting forth, you can actually see those seeds start to grow.
Wonderful. Thank you, Josh. So now that we know a little bit more about what type of IEP meetings and transition planning that occurs during the high school period, right now we're going to talk about the importance of family collaboration in the IEP and transition meetings. So why are student and family why are they so important, right? So family goals and perspectives are the foundation of the IEP and ITP process. So like the biggest question that you're answering is, what do you and your student want after high school? We want to consider family values and culture. I know Josh just mentioned it briefly, and Julia will mention it a little bit more in depth later, but what is the family value? Do they value higher education after high school, or do they value the student adding to the workforce? So those are things that you want to keep in mind during this time, right? Other things or skills to consider are self-advocacy skills, which include speaking up and advocating for your students' wants and needs. If you're the student, if you are the family, self-awareness is another one, another skill that usually comes hand in hand with self-advocacy, as self-awareness is the ability to know what those wants and needs are for your student as a parent, as a family member, as an educator. So you can't really self-advocate if you don't have self-awareness. So that's why these skills are so important, right? Other things to consider is, are the goals, is the vision that you have for your student culturally relevant to you, right? Another thing that is really big is partnerships, right? The partnership that you have created with the school team, right? From special education teachers and the various other teachers that your student may have, right? Administration, counselors, school psychologists. That partnership is very important, right? To work collaboratively with during this IEP and ITP process. But not only those partnerships from the school settings, but partnerships that may come from the community, right? From other service providers, from other agencies like the regional centers or family resource centers, other agencies of that nature that may also be contributing to your students' progress and their success. So we want to be on the same page because we're on the same team, right? I know, for example, some students who are in the elementary setting, they may be receiving services like applied behavior analysis, right? So that's another team in itself. So yeah, we just really want to make sure that you're being realistic for your child and your family and the future that Julia will talk about a bit.
So yeah, thank you, Liz and Josh, for explaining the bulk of kind of why IEPs in high school are important, because when we get to the table, I think the IETP is honestly the fun process. It really puts the power back into the student and kind of say, no, like, we're just here to support you. What do you want? And that's really the ultimate goal. And I hope this training kind of brings that empowerment to you as well, to say the roadmap that Josh talked about, that's exactly what the school and the team and everyone is going to want to set up to achieve. And so just to kind of recap, this isn't an exhaustive list of opportunities. There's things that aren't on here that families and students can pursue, but just kind of a understanding of what opportunities are available for students with disabilities following high school. And so things to consider: if the student and the family are looking at continued education or college, there's your standard kind of 4-year university, 2-year college, that kind of approach. Something also to consider for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, there are programs called inclusive post-secondary education programs, and these are specifically housed at certain colleges. They're kind of newer on the West Coast. UCLA has a program. I think that's kind of the closest one. Cal State Long Beach has a newly launched one, hopefully is going to stay in kind of production. And so what this program offers is a way for students with intellectual developmental disabilities who didn't graduate high school with a diploma to still be a part of that college life experience and continue their education. So that's an avenue as well. And then also students can pursue an adult transition program, so they'll still be involved in some form of education once they follow high school. Another option is students who are kind of on that career-driven path and want something more related in the trade school. I've listed some there. Of course, there's more. And so that's another opportunity that students can pursue after high school. And then just a summary, a little bit of alternative family decisions. Again, some families can pursue things internally where, hey, we have a family business. We want the student to work for us. That's an ITP can be set up for that. Or there's a community that we want our students to kind of participate in, or a religious organization or commitment that students take after high school. And then even on a personal level, family members may want to talk about, actually, I just like the goal that the student and I want to have is having more responsibility in the home. Maybe they cook for themselves, grocery shopping, financially responsible, those things like that, those kind of bigger skills. And military service is also a family decision as well. So again, not an extensive list here, but just things to consider.
And then
And go
Julie,
ahead, yeah.
can I add one more thing? Also, especially on the educational and college front, I think it's really important to note that the student or a student that has an IEP, the IEP doesn't necessarily carry over to college, right? However, those accommodations do carry over to college. So if a student has, let's say, time and a half on test, or they can test in a separate location, those things carry over into college, right? And that's why I think that the ITP is extremely important, because if you are taking the 4-year university route or the 2-year college, any type of like post-secondary or educational programs, it's really important that students have the ability to advocate for themselves, and they have the proper training to advocate for themselves. Because ultimately, I think it's really important that we teach students, how do you be the best version of you? And what does the best version of you look like? So an IEP doesn't make anyone less than, it just makes they learn differently. And so we want to make for sure that they are still able to learn in the best possible way for them. And so I think that that's why like having these IEP meetings, especially in high school, becomes extremely critical to their maturation process once they leave us and then they go obtain jobs in their potential careers.
Exactly. Thank you, Josh. And kind of bridging off of that, these are just important life skills that can be put on an ITP because they kind of transfer over either if you're going to continue education, going straight to career, or just building that individual repertoire skill base. And so these are potential things that you can consider with your student about what goals or skills you want to focus on in the ITP. So goals can really, there's can be a goal specifically on flexible thinking. How does that work? So if something comes up, what are ways you can pivot and problem solve? That's a skill that's needed regardless of where you go. So these are skills that are important, and it comes from Think College, which is a whole database about inclusive post-secondary education. And so you can look there for more information, but just skills that students can work on in an ITP that will transcend in different environments. And like Josh said, it just helps make a more well-rounded student. And the ITP is focused directly on what the student and the family want. And so these are just some skills that can be implemented because the goals can be super tailored to what the student wants. If the student wants to pursue education, then I've seen goals written on like, okay, how do you know how to apply for college? Like know how to navigate the application system, goals like that. So it can get really specific. And I think that's where the fun and empowerment can come into it.